Everyone, I'm glad to see you all have found the tea that we stored in the kitchen. You're very welcome to that. Some more housekeeping. There are bathrooms in that room and one more past there. In the case of an emergency, there are doors and windows all around this room. I'm Ash Kirby-Miller. I'm the staff naturalist here, and it's my great delight to do a little more housekeeping and thank our sponsors, and then get to the main show with this naturalist journey. First, we like to thank our sponsors, Hunger Mountain Co-op, Waite, Heindel, Environmental, Catamount Solar, Onion River, Outdoors, and the Washington Electric Co-op. This is also the second to last of our events through a grant funded by the Lake Champlain Basin Program that have ranged everywhere from naturalist-led paddles on local water bodies to a river festival we had here at the Nature Center, and now our last two naturalist journeys in this river theme. Tonight, Anna Maria's portrayal of what is going on this particular stretch of river and floodplain. And then the next and final one is a chamber music performance here on March 31st. But with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Anna Maria, a teacher naturalist here at the Nature Center. And as we have had many, many wonderfully talented PhDs and naturalists of all sorts of skills here at the Nature Center, we now have the ultimate expert in what is happening with these individual foxes and these individual beavers. Anna Maria just told me that they sorted through 2,000 videos of beavers, not just beavers in the greatest sense of the word on the continental scale, but 2,000 videos of the beavers that live there and there. And I'm sure they can tell you like 1 or 2 or 7 other places to point on this like 200-meter stretch of the North Branch. So this is going to be an incredible presentation. I'm so excited to see it after months and months and years in preparation to put together just the entire lives and great intimate detail of these critters in our very literal backyard right here. So thanks, Anna Maria, and please take it away.
Thank you. I'm excited. Awesome. I'm gonna put this down here.
Can I jump in with one more housekeeping? Folks, there will be time for questions at the end. This is also being live streamed for folks who can't attend us in person, and it's best for the experience of everyone to just focus all of our questions for the end. That way it'll be easy to pick up on the mics, and folks at home can know what we're all having a conversation about here. Great, thanks.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. I'm really, really excited to do this because this has been my passion project of the winter and certainly before that. But I'm even more excited to see so many of you that I know in this room, and I'm really grateful that you all took the time to be here tonight to talk about some Riverside wildlife. So without further ado, I guess the best place to start would be with welcome to North Branch Nature Center. And whenever I start talking about the lives of individuals in this way, I find it's very easy for us to start by zooming in and get very excited right away to get to know each of these little persons on a very intimate basis. But to better understand their lives and our shared experience, it's best to start by zooming out. And so here we are at North Branch Nature Center. We're nestled in this beautiful valley between several tongues of forest that stretch down into the capital city of Montpelier. And that puts us in a really unique position of being in this natural travel corridor of all sorts of wildlife. So not only do we have the great attraction of being low ground instead of high ground, We also have the river cutting right through it. And that makes this a really unique habitat for the creatures that live here. Is this anybody's first time at North Branch Nature Center tonight? Great. I imagine there are probably people on live stream who are less familiar with it. But for the purposes of tonight, this is North Branch Nature Center. As we know it in the winter, probably the more popular view is the beautiful summer trees or the fall foliage. But this is what it has looked like for the last 4 months and what it has looked like for the majority of my time preparing for this particular presentation. And it's certainly captivating and beautiful on its own. You can see pretty much the entirety of the property that this presentation takes place on just by looking out the window. So everything is in the curve of this river valley with a couple of highlights that I will specify if they are outside of that zone. And when we look at places like North Branch Nature Center, this is usually where we start out, right? We start with a trail map. It's the first thing that greets you when we come in. And it's pretty helpful for us. It has Sapsucker Grove on it and Otter Rock and Pebble Beach, and it shows our parking lots and our solar panels. And that's all important information for those of us that walk these paths on 2 legs. But it's not necessarily the best way for us to get to know our wild neighbors as deeply. So how do I do that? Well, the first thing that I do is start by saying hi. And if you do not know the person sitting next to you or behind you, I would like you to say hi to them now. And introduce yourselves. Great, that was perfect. Excellent greetings. Good job forging a small connection with one another in that moment. The way that we do that with wildlife can look a little different, but there are a whole lot of ways that we do that to get to know our wildlife as well. And these are some of the ways that I've used leading up to this presentation. There's so many more, but loosely they fall into these categories of tracking, which is looking for the signs that they leave on the landscape that we can interpret to get a better understanding of their behavior and activity. Trail cameras. So in this case, I'm primarily talking about remote activated cameras that take photos of wildlife without me having to be in the field with them. And that's where that photo of the fox came from. This fox and this dead deer that it was eating are actually not in the North Branch Park, but I just thought it was such a good photo that I wanted to put it in somewhere, so it's the representation of that photo. And then direct observation, which is the time that we spend actually getting to look at these animals through binoculars or just by standing there and getting to see them for a couple brief moments. So these are the tools that I've used this winter to build this presentation, but also the tools that I use all year round, every year, to build my relationship with these particular neighbors. And you can spend years and years and years of life learning how to do all of these things to the most professional extent possible. But for me, the place that I start with is a changing of my map. So I have a new map here. This is a winter version of the map. And this has some different labels on it. This map does not specify places that we might recognize. It does specify trails, because those trails are plowed and groomed during the winter, which means that the snow there is usually 1 foot to 2 feet less deep than everywhere else on the property, which is pretty exciting. We also have some unique habitat zones here. So we have places where we have a lot of tree cover. The snow there is going to be shallower. They'll have more shelter. It sometimes is colder in those zones because there's less sunlight hitting the forest floor. We have places where there's tall grass. And tall grass, when the snow falls, leaves a whole network of warm air trapped close to the ground, and lots of tunneling availability all through that tall grass underneath the snow. And then, of course, we have some resources like seeds. And seeds are the catch-all resource, because where there are things that eat seeds, there's another resource, which is things that eat seeds, for things that eat seeds. So that counts as like 2 resources in one. And then we have the subject of our fascination tonight, which is ice. Much in the same way that we feel when we get the first good freeze of the season and suddenly the possibilities of ice skating and snowshoeing and cross-country skiing become relevant again, the animals have the same situation where what was once an impassable corridor of water turns into a highway. And that is where things start to get really exciting. So we're going to start right at the beginning, which is at the bridge. So we're starting down at the very bottom right corner of the map, crossing the bridge that takes you further into the North Branch River Park, which you could use to walk all the way to downtown Montpelier, or you could use that to connect to the mountain biking trails on the far side of the river, all of that. From here, the bridge is straight that way. You can't see it right now because it's behind the red barn, but it's straight that way. And for most of us, the bridge feels like kind of just a point of passing, right? We use the bridge to get to somewhere else. And most of us aren't spending a lot of our time in the winter hanging out on or under the bridge because it's icy and it's cold and it's not really a place where we spend our time. But it does give us an incredible vantage point into some of the other things that are going on. So these are a couple of photos from the bridge. The one on the left is an example of tracks that I found pretty often this winter while crossing the bridge and looking over. And you'll be able to see that these particular tracks go up across the snow, and then these go up and they actually wind all the way down the edge of the park. And this is what I was looking for pretty much every day when I would go down to the bridge and just get a starting point for what kind of activity had happened on the river the night before. And one morning when I was out tracking, I came down to the bridge and I looked out and I saw this path in the snow on the right side of the trail. And that, of course, immediately jumps out because that is a fresh path in some beautiful, fresh, fluffy snow of a scene of something that had happened there. And when you see that, you have to go and investigate a little more closely. So I'll take you a little closer. When I got up close to it, I found these tracks that initially looked like some sort of dramatic, maybe minuscule dog dragging several leashes around, or something else. And the tracks basically made this loop that you can see in the first picture. They came in one way, they made this loop, and then there was a patch in the snow, in that patch of sunlight, and then the tracks returned to this burrow in the bank that you can see. And these tracks are representative of a couple of different animals. And tonight, I don't want to go into all the details of how to tell these different things apart because that could be a whole time in itself. So I am going to ask you to trust my interpretation tonight, and I'm happy to answer those kinds of questions at another point, but today I'm going to remove some of the mystery for you. And I'm going to tell you that this is the trail of a mink that was feeding on a muskrat. And here's how I know that, is that I have a trail here on the left side of this photo that looks very different from the trail on the right side of the photo, right? We have a long straight line in the middle, and we have these kind of left-right prints like this. This is an animal walking and dragging something through the snow, which I believe was a muskrat dragging its tail. On this side of the photo, we have that drag line going on, but we're missing the left-right prints. So there's just the drags here, and instead, we've got these tracks on the side that are arranged in these little groups. They drop back into a diagonal walk for a little bit, and then they go back into this bounding pattern. And you can see the drags going in and out of the snowbank here. This is the trail of a muskrat walking onto the ice. And this is the trail of a mink that has caught a muskrat and is dragging the body back into a burrow in the snow. And this is what it looked like when it dragged it back in. Here you have the trail of one animal moving, and then you have a trail of an animal moving, carrying another animal. And here it goes, using the same trail that's already been plowed through the snow, to go right back underneath a beaver dam, and then presumably into its burrow somewhere underneath the snow. And all of this story had happened the night before I saw it. And then our tracking club got to see it the next day. And Ash sent me some pictures and was like, hey, did you see this? I was like, yeah, whose footprints do you think those are? It was mine. So, of course, that's very cool, right? Because what this is I saw it under the bridge. And when I see something like that happening under the bridge, that tells me that it's probably time for me to take a closer look. And the way that I choose to take a closer look sometimes is with just sitting there and waiting. But more often, I prefer to use the less invasive option of trail cameras. So here's our mink. But of course, I don't just predict which animal is going to show up. And chances are, if there's one animal, there's going to be more. Like this dark-eyed junco that was part of a little flock that was feeding underneath the bridge. Or this winter wren with its short little tail. And the tiniest little hops. Or a shrew, one of the smallest mammals that we have in North America. And of course the mice. They're always there. And this mouse has come back and forth a lot, actually using the same tunnel that the shrew took on the other side. Here's the red squirrel, and if you've walked down by the bridge, you've probably seen its tracks going back and forth from the bushes next to the bridge to the big old willow tree that sits right against the river, and it looks like little skating tracks back and forth and back and forth. The squirrel didn't have too many concerns about this camera situation. So I didn't get to see all of those animals in tracks. I have a lot of photos of those animals' tracks represented from all over the property, but I did get to, by following that mink, put a face to that story, right? This is probably the same mink. There's not that many minks overlapping in their habitat, which is something I know because of the research into their natural history that I can then do at home and put together with these things, right? To answer the question of, is that the same mink that killed the muskrat? And I think it probably is. And that's just under one bridge. And that's crazy. And these are just my favorite videos from under that bridge. I didn't even put all of them in here. So under the bridge is where we start. But just like those trails that travel back and forth, there's so many things that draw you out from under the bridge, further up the riverbank. So as we move up north along the river, we enter these wide, flat zones of ice that turn into these amazing highways for the animals. And you can just imagine how exciting it would be for them. They don't get to run on the river all winter long, or all summer long. They go down there and maybe they splash across, but their feet get wet. And now this time of year, they get to just run and explore. And they're hunting and having a grand old time. And so walking up and down the riverbank is one of my favorite ways to monitor the last night's news. So here's some tracks that I found along the riverbank. These tracks I actually followed all the way around the Nature Center property, where they had come off of Gould Hill Road, down to the river. They had passed along that side, crossed the street, went up into the neighbor's property on the other side of the street, crossed the Finch Road, gone into Hubbard Park. I trailed it all the way across Hubbard Park to where it crossed the street again over on that side of the property next to the orchard, went down through the Forest Preschool Deer Camp, which is like right in, which one? This one, which is right here. So it had come all the way down from Gould Hill Road, across, up into here, done some stuff in here that I don't know about because I was not in the neighbors' backyards. But I picked up the trail right here, where it went up into Hubbard Park, then came back down, went across the river, and then made a whole nother loop up into the forest up here. So it had gone all the way around the river, probably in approximately 1 hour of its life, based on what I know of this creature. And somewhere along the way, it left a beautiful little scenic scat on the smallest possible raised mound in the snow, facing the riverbank. And I didn't put a camera specifically on that scat site because I know these animals visit a lot of spots, but I did put one further up the riverbank in a spot where it narrows down. And I figured that if the fisher was moving there, she would be moving here too. And here she is. This is March 3rd. And there she leaves a little bit of pee, and then she leaves. And that's it, right? That's like 4 seconds of her life. And that's it. But by seeing that, and seeing this, we can put together everything else that happened before this point that she spent. You can hear the water moving under the ice too. Right across from where this camera is that got this video of the fisher is this kind of flat part on the riverbank. And you can see all these beautiful, spectacular trails here, right? There's these elongated trails that are really stretched out from an animal running. There's some smaller tracks here from an animal that's moving a little more slowly, more over there. There's this thing winding around, and all of it kind of just playing along the edge of the river here. I did look at many of these tracks, but these particular ones caught my eye in this instance for several different reasons. The ruler that's in the snow is what made this mark right here, and it's also what made that straight line right there. But the lines on this side of the track were there when I found it. And when I saw that, it immediately jumped out to me as something interesting, because these are coyote tracks. And this is a baseline gait, so this is a normal body movement for them when they're traveling a long distance. They're just running. We call this a side trot. And what this is the front foot is here, and here, and here. Those are all represented on the left side, but this is a right front, left front, right front, left front. And this is a right hind foot, left hind foot, right hind foot, left hind foot. And knowing that track pattern told me this individual coyote is dragging its right hind foot. Here's the dragging right hind, dragging right hind, dragging right hind, dragging right hind. Here it is again, dragging right hind, dragging the right hind, dragging, 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 and you could follow it all the way back. I have no idea why this coyote was dragging one right hind foot for one night, because I didn't see these tracks with this pattern again. So I have no idea why this coyote was dragging one right hind foot. But I do know that a coyote somehow irritated its foot in such a way that it wasn't able to put all of its weight on it quite right, and it was dragging through the snow while it was running. There's a whole lot of coyote tracks though, and some of them are much more normal. And some of them represent a whole lot of drama. So we have a standard looking trail right here, dot, 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 dot. This is my tracks, this is my tracks, this is my tracks. This is also a coyote. This is the coyote, this is the coyote, and this is the coyote. This coyote was full sprinting down the riverbank, absolutely exploded across the thin ice, leapt approximately 6 feet through the air, over that because it had to jump over this hill and land on the other side. So probably closer to 8 feet of air time. And then in a full stretched out like race, headed further down the river. Here's the coyote with the dragging foot again. There, there, there. And what I did not get a good picture of, because they were kind of destroyed by the time I got there, was the trail of a white-tailed deer in a full sprint, the same direction the coyote was going. I can't tell you for certain that the white-tailed deer was sprinting because the coyote was also sprinting after it, but it kind of seems like a good story to me. And I knew that all of these tracks were fresh because I had been here the day before. So I actually had photos from the day before that I had taken that told me that all of this had happened the night before. So again, I left my camera out here, and sometimes the quality doesn't work as well. But this is on February 7th, and there's this beautiful dark coyote crossing the river. And 3 days later, we have this lighter colored coyote, a little bit taller too, that's crossing the river. And I'm actually going to pause it there because February 10th that morning I had gone tracking, and when I came along the river and found some of the tracks, I was noticing these patches of blood in the snow. And I followed them kind of along the river, and I found one, and then I found like a really small one further up, and then the trail turned into the woods and another trail joined it. And then I found a patch of blood with coyote pee on top of it. And this time of year, early February, is right in the peak of coyote breeding season. So these were the trails of a female coyote in estrus, so in heat, getting ready to breed, and a male coyote following her trail 3 nights later, because the tracks I found the morning of February 10th were fresh, and the tracks that I had seen with the blood were not as fresh, they were filled in with snow, which told me that the first coyote in this video is probably the female in estrus walking by. And then 3 nights later, this male coyote has come by right here, and he's gone under that big tree that she headed to that you can't actually see in these videos, and gone up into the woods. And then once I knew what to look for, I went back. Here's the female, December 24th, with that really dark tail with a white patch at the top. And 2 days after that, here's the male. He's much sleeker looking. And he has kind of a dark stripe on his back legs, like right on his rump. He's so pretty. There he is again in Hubbard Park, that male and the female, on the same night. Here they are together on the same night, February 3rd. That male with the dark stripe and the female that's all dark and scruffy looking. So I saw the tracks, but then when I was able to get back into the rest of my footage, there they are. They were 2 days apart from each other, all through December and January. And by February, they hit the same point in time and they started hanging out together. And then they were together in Hubbard Park, they were together on North Branch, and they've been together up in the North Branch River Park on the other side. They're not the only coyotes that are around here, but they do consistently travel together. So I've seen them several times now. I didn't even include all of their moments. So here's just a still for you so you can see the two of them. The female has this really dark, almost German Shepherd-y looking coat going on with that bright spot right at the top of her tail that makes it really easy to see in the black and white. And the male has this dramatic black stripe along his hind legs that also helps me to tell them apart in the dark when you can't see all of their coloring. And gosh, they're just incredible, beautiful animals. The story of the coyotes dragged me further up the river to where I found this site. We're all the way up at the river bend up here now. So we've come all the way up the river to this corner river bend where I came out and there were all these gorgeous fresh deer tracks down on the ice, crossing from one side of the river to the other. And there's the deer tracks with their long toes like dragging in the fluffy snow because it's just a little bit of powder that they're just kicking up slightly. And the picture on the right is the tracks of another animal. There's a depression in the snow here, and there's a little pile of scats. And then there's some marks here. And when I pressed my finger down into the snow, I could feel that it was compressed. It had like frozen into ice. So where this is all fluff, and you can actually see the grains of fluff that have been scattered across the snow, this down in here was ice. And when I pressed on it, I couldn't distort the shape of the snow in there. If you got a look at these scats, you would have seen that they were like little spirals. And every single one was its own little spiral shape. Does that information ring a bell for anybody here? Of something you might seen? Great. This is the tracks of a mourning dove in the winter. Mourning doves roost on the ground pretty often, or at the base of small trees. And this mourning dove had spent several hours resting on the ground in the snow, left a nice little pile of mourning dove scats, frozen the snow underneath it with the heat of its body, and then taken off in the morning and left its wing marks here on the side. I don't really know why they do this, because you're probably thinking that seems like not a great idea for a bird to sleep on the ground in the open on top of a frozen riverbank. And all I can say to that is that me and Sean have both separately found dead mourning doves killed by other things this winter. So evolution is not a perfect science, but this is what happens. So the deer trails that I was following, they were coming right down this hill right here. And you can see all of these tracks at the bottom of the hill. And then there's some tracks up here. So the deer were coming down this hill, out under here, and then crossing the ice like towards us, towards the North Branch side. This is the other side of the river, in that far corner of the property, like straight out that way through this window. And this little hillside was really neat, partly because there were all of these dense conifer trees up here. And right at the very bottom, kind of in the middle of all of these tracks, is this hole. And of course, when you see a hole in the side of a riverbank surrounded by tracks, you've got to go and check it out. So when I got closer, these are the tracks that were right outside of the hole on the left. These are fresh tracks also. They've just barely disturbed that fluffy powder. And on the ground outside the hole, I was finding these branches that looked like this. There's some more in the background, all scattered. Branches from those conifer trees that were up on the top of the hill. So I got a little bit closer. And when I looked at the entrance to the hole, I could see that the snow outside of it was dirty, which told me that whatever had been moving through there had come out of the hole because it had dragged dirt with it and left dirty footprints coming out. And stuck on these little roots were hairs. There were these long hair fibers stuck to the roots. This is the old abandoned lodge of a beaver lodge that was built into the side of the riverbank. And these, during the summer, when the water is high enough, they'll be completely covered. And the beavers can enter them under the water, but they're completely protected. Well, this summer, the beavers built a new dam upstream of this site. So the water level here dropped. And then when it froze, the entrance to this beaver lodge was completely open. And so I could actually get a really good look inside of it. And these are the tracks of the animal that was going in and out of here. They've got this flat, like almost triangle shape, and there's some stuff up here, and there's all these lines going in and out of this burrow. Is this shouting anything for anybody?
I don't know about.
So this porcupine spent about 20 hours a day for 9.5 days straight inside of this lodge. It would come out for 2-hour chunks at a time to go feed and then go back in. And while it was gone, one night this raccoon came and hung out there and then scent marked the outside. I call this guy bent tail raccoon because of the bend in his tail, and I've seen him on several other cameras also. Then the gray fox had to leave a message. And this coyote had to. This is not the dark female or the lighter male. This is a different one. And the porcupine, here he is coming out for his midday feeding. Sometimes the porcupine would just come out and lay in the sun for a little while. But every day, really, really solid routine that this porcupine came up with. I don't know where this porcupine is now. I'm assuming that it has another spot that it's living because the river has thawed and there's no way the beaver or the porcupine is accessing this spot anymore. So I'm not sure where it went, but for a couple of days through one of the coldest parts of this winter, this porcupine found itself in the perfect little spot to curl up literally 10 feet from its larder, which was those conifer trees directly above it. And all it had to do was go up the hill, eat some plants, go down the hill, clean up whatever it had dropped onto the snow, and then go back into the hole every single day. And really the crux of this is that everything just comes back to the beavers. I mean, these beavers are the ones that are making all of this possible for the other animals. So leaving the very top of the riverbank where the porcupine was, here's the beaver dam that they built that left all of this downstream shallow and slow, because all of this upstream has been quite deep for most of the season. We're kind of come all the way down here, right across from the bridge, where there is a series of beaver wetlands that I'm sure many of you have seen and enjoyed if you have spent any time on our trails. So here's their lodge in the middle of this photo. You can see their trails actually going to and from the lodge here. Those are the beaver trails. Here, here, here. They're going out to collect some food, and then they're going back into their lodge. They have entrances underwater. Here's the tracks of something else that has run across the pond, and same over here. And this is what their winter activity looks like most of the time. They spend a lot of their time popping out of these holes that they keep open physically by chewing them open when they freeze over. And they come out, they walk over, they do some feeding. They've done some feeding right here. They'll plow right through the slush and leave these like slide-looking things. And they just keep eating. And these beavers have had a particularly hard time this winter because last summer, the drought left their beaver pond completely empty. So they had to move partway through the summer and spend most of their time out on the open river, which makes it a lot harder for them to store food. So all of their food stores from the summer, by the time we got to September, were pretty much exposed to the air. And sometimes that's fine, but sometimes that can cause the wood that they gather to spoil more quickly, and they need to eat the bark. So if they can keep it underwater, it really does a great job at like refrigerating it so that they can feast on that all winter long. So they had this trouble all winter long, or all summer long, and they managed to build up a good supply of food, even though I think it wasn't their preference. It was kind of dried out. And then luckily the pond filled back in with enough time that through October and November, they were able to gather some more food. But then this winter has been incredibly cold, and we've had a lot of snow. And they stopped being able to keep these holes open because they can't chew them open fast enough to compensate for how cold it was. So they took all their resources and they concentrated them on this one hole. One single beaver hole that you may have seen if you've walked by the trails by the bridge, because they put it right next to the blind that's down there. And they have been using that as their primary source in and out of their lodge to collect food for probably the last month and a half. So I have a camera there. And we're just going to take a little sneak peek into the lives of some beavers. This compilation is edited so that it can be on YouTube later, so there are some labels that hopefully you'll see later on. There they go, working together all night long, in and out of their hole, and all day long, in and out of their hole. I find it incredible that they can maneuver these like entire saplings under the water into their lodge. This beaver is harvesting some ferns that were left over from last year, but that became edible once the snow melted off. These videos were so long, I had to speed them up a little bit. This one's got some mittens going on, but beavers are very cautious. They spend a lot of time watching for danger. And they also spend a lot of time building. This is a behavior that we typically associate with mud and dam building, but this beaver is doing it with snow. And they have really, really strong social lives. They're very close to one another. Their whole family spends the winter together inside of their lodge. And they feed together, they groom one another. And a beaver's family usually includes the 2 adults and the young from the year before, and then potentially new young. So this is a yearling. This is one of their babies. It has a completely smooth tail. These are the adults. I've nicknamed them Notch and Chomp. This is Chomp on the right. He has like 2 big things on the side of his tail, and this is Notch. And Notch has 1 big scar on the left side of the tail. And the adults are much more watchful than the babies. So there's the yearling on the right, just kind of like futzing around. And here's Notch going right up the hill to go get some food. And there's just a comparison of the adult and the baby, which I'm going to just pause so you can look at it. When I pause the stills, you can really see that here's the adult, much larger than this baby. Their head, the adult has this boxy, almost like square head, whereas the baby has this soft, round little face, and the eye almost looks like it takes up more of its face than the adult. So this beaver is a year old, but it still has totally a baby body and face going on. And this particular family has 2 adults and 2 babies with them. And I'm hoping that in the next couple of months, they'll maybe have another litter, and there will be even more little babies hanging out here. There they go. But this is just kind of what their life is like. You know, they hang out, the adults are feeding, the babies get excited and play. I'll let you see that one again because it's adorable. So adult is feeding on the left, another one on the right is going to get food. There goes one of the babies, and you can actually see the water splashing in the hole. There's another baby in there. And here's the 2 adults working, heading out off on their commute. Here's our mink again. This is a beautiful male mink. He's got a really nice big head. And our red fox, probably the same one from the photo that I showed you earlier. And even a tiny one. That's a vole. The tunnel had frozen over, and the vole was running inside the frozen tunnel. The blue jay is using the mud that they've excavated to do some feeding and probably finding bugs that they've ripped up. And just this week, the pond finally thawed out for the first time in months. And the beavers have had the chance to return to the water. I pulled this camera because it was really close to falling into the water, and I didn't want that to happen. But this is what their pond looks like now. They have their water again, thankfully. And I can tell that they're very excited. And I know that because I've avoided talking about one of the other methods of observation, which is the direct observation, for a couple of reasons. Partly because direct observation is really hard if you're not looking at birds or bugs. Birds and bugs are everywhere. They're very easy to find. You just can go to a place that has birds and bugs, and you just sit there, and the birds and bugs are there. And I'm sure there's lots of skill involved in these things, but compared to mammals, it's just really not the same thing. The exception to that being beavers. Beavers live in one pond, and they're always in that pond. And beavers, like porcupines, have a very routine schedule in which they come out 30 minutes before sunset, and they go back into their lodge 30 minutes before sunrise or after sunrise. And that makes them a lot easier to watch. So last summer, I invented a hobby called beavering, in which I leave my apartment in downtown Montpelier, and I drive here, and I go down to the pond, and then I sit there, and I look at the beavers. And that worked great for most of the summer. The drought did put a damper on that because I could tell that the beavers were stressed. So I spent a lot of the summer watching them, and then the drought started causing more alarm behaviors from the beavers. They were slapping more. They would rest in the water and gnash their teeth at me, which is another sign of them saying, like, please go away. And so I stopped hanging out there, and then it got winter, and it got really cold, and I didn't want to be there anymore. And then it felt unfair for me to go and sit and watch them in their one hole the only place that they could leave to go get food, I felt that was a little bit unfair on my part. So I waited, and this week, the river thawed out. And so on Tuesday night, when it was a nice balmy 55 degrees, I came out to do some beavering for the season. And I'll be honest, it was kind of a hard sell for me. I didn't want to come down to the pond to look at beavers because I had already gone home, and I didn't want to come back here. But I did it, and I told myself I would go for 30 minutes, and I could leave after 30 minutes. And that's what I did. I went down, and I sat there, and I didn't even make it to the pond, because by the time I got to the bridge, I could see the beavers in the river. They are so excited to have the river back. At first, it was just the two of them, and they were just swimming around. And then I saw one more pop up, and it climbed up with one of the other two, and they were eating together. And then I saw a fourth one, and that one was like swimming upstream, so I guess it was going somewhere else to do some feeding. And when I first got onto the bridge, they did like one little slap, and somehow they're able to communicate like the severity of danger through their slapping, because the one little slap did not do anything. Like the other beavers just kind of like looked around, and then they were like, whatever. But 15 minutes later, a walker came by with her dog, and they walked under the bridge, and the dog was like playing in the snow, and that was a big slap. And then all the beavers went under the water, and they stayed there for another 10 minutes before they came back out. And as I was sitting there, I realized that I wanted to look at them more closely, and I had brought binoculars, but it was too dark to see them now because I'd been so entranced that I forgot I even had the binoculars. And right at that moment, I heard a familiar and unexpected noise coming from the woods that was like a beep, beep. And then it was quiet for a while, and then I just heard it above, like, and it was one lone woodcock that was displaying. I don't know if this is a young woodcock that still doesn't know about false spring. I don't know if it's an especially determined male woodcock that has come back really early to make sure that he can stake out his claim before the others come back. But that was the last thing I could hear, and at that point it was too dark for me to see the beavers, and I was getting really cold, and I checked my watch, and I had been there for 25 minutes. And so I sat there for another 5 minutes, and then I got up and I went home. And this is a really kind of special practice to me in a lot of ways, because I think it sounds very easy, but it's not necessarily an easy thing for me to do. And I have this picture that feels very representative of the whole naturalist journey for me. This is me feeding ducks on my dad's college campus where he still teaches. And this is just how I feel about a lot of my naturalist journey, where it's very easy when the ducks stay in the water and you stay on land and you feed the ducks and you interact with them in a specific way, and then you leave and the ducks leave, and everybody has gotten what they wanted out of the interaction, right? But it often doesn't feel like that when we're talking about animals. There's a lot of guilt associated for me around not wanting to disturb them. I found that I really liked tracking and trail cameras because it felt like I wasn't going to interrupt their lives, and that felt important to me. And that turned from me not wanting to bother them to me avoiding them. And I started leaning on tracking and camera trapping as a way to avoid any potential of me messing up their lives. And that has been the biggest thing that I've learned so far on my very short, in comparison, naturalist journey so far, which is that I have a right to be out there interacting with these animals. These animals know us, and they know who we are, and they know that human on the bridge is going to stay on the bridge, and they know that human under the bridge might go in the water. So big slap, little slap, they know. They can tell the difference there. And they can teach us a lot more if we're willing to go out there and give them the chance to share that with us. So here are just some of the things that I've been thinking about as I consider my own naturalist journey and the journey that these animals have taken me on this winter in particular, which is that the big changes are messy. This is not clean. The beavers are not clean. None of this is. It looks very perfect, but when you get a spot like this that's just like covered in dirt and it smells like pond water and they're leaving wood chips everywhere and they've literally taken down probably close to 20 trees in this spot right now. it starts to feel a little bit like maybe something is wrong and we're not supposed to be doing that. And I think that's how we can often feel when we're trying to make change in the world, especially if we're environmentalists and we're trying to make change in places where humans don't necessarily feel like we're supposed to be sometimes. But without that, we don't get this. You don't get a pond. You don't get a dam. You don't get a frozen pond at sunset without doing all the wood chips that come first. If we don't let our kids do this, poke their hands in a hole, stick rulers into it, check what the measurements are, and then write down what they see, we don't get people who are willing to build trails like this. And if we're not willing to do that, then we miss out on this. This is the exact same trail. This is a barred owl that through the winter can often have a hard time because when the snow is 2 feet deep and your legs are not 2 feet long, it gets really hard to find food that's under the snow. So this barred owl got a chance to grab some food on the trail, which had been groomed and was a place where voles are running back and forth. And this barred owl got the opportunity to get a meal on our trail. We have a responsibility in a way that the beavers probably don't think about, in that for the beavers, what matters to protect is this, right? That's their family, that's their hole. That's the thing that matters to beavers. And we have a different responsibility, which is that we have to protect this.
That's another tree. Oh, it's in there. It's still growing.
And this is the same spot where we have our family of raccoons. I am really excited to be here because I don't feel like I have all the answers of how to be a naturalist and how to protect these things that we care about. But the beavers have a lot of things figured out. And beavers don't apologize for cutting down trees, and they don't apologize for making dams. And it's okay with a beaver to leave some marks out there. And so my challenge in my naturalist journey this year has been to make it okay to leave my tracks on the unbroken snow, to make it okay to leave my trail camera because the animals know it's there and they have choices. They can walk in front of it if they want to, and they don't have to. And I'm allowed to leave my trail camera there, trusting that they have the ability to make those decisions. And that it's okay for us to do those kinds of things. We're allowed to go out there, put our hands on the wood, we're allowed to feel it, we're allowed to sit and watch the beavers and trust that they'll slap their tails if it's too much. That's where I'm at right now on my naturalist journey. And my goal next time is to be able to get down to the pond and stay there for maybe 35 minutes and see how I do. I wanted to include, just to make sure that you have the opportunity to use these resources if you want them. I am very passionate about the learning aspect of this. So here's your opportunity. If you want more resources, feel free to take a photo of this slide. These are just a couple of things that I've collected specific to tracking, but any of these resources will lead you towards other types of naturalist education stuff. So I'll give you a chance to just take a photo if you want, or you're always welcome to reach out if you need a recommendation of any sorts. And with resources offered to you, I will leave us out for some questions. Yeah, go for it.
How about otters? Because I saw otters sitting at Mill Pond Park. They were just sliding down the hill, going back up, sliding.
Yeah. How about otters?
Have you seen otters on your stretch? Or?
I seem to have bad luck with otters in that I feel like I only find their tracks at times where it's very inconvenient for me. For example, when I'm driving on the highway, I've seen 2 otters while driving on the highway, and neither of them were places I can stop. So they're here for sure. Ash actually saw their tracks this winter, and then by the time I went to look for them, they were gone. So they're here for sure, and I just didn't get lucky this winter to be able to include them here. Which is too bad. I was really hoping I would. Yeah.
I remember a lecture here many years ago on coyotes, and it said that only the alpha male and female breed in a pack. Did you see evidence of a larger pack with those two, or?
Yeah, so packs of coyotes are really family groups, where when they talk about having an alpha male and a female, what they mean are a mature male and mature female, and the rest of the pack is almost always their offspring. And so they will have packs of their young from the last couple of years and then their newest young. So around here, like that pair of coyotes is definitely a pair. And I haven't seen any evidence that they still have young with them right now. I have seen another group of coyotes, that's a group of 3, that seem to be hanging out together, but they were not here for most of the winter and they only just showed up. So I don't know if they're like moving around more because it's breeding season. So yes, the males and the females, only the adults will breed, and they will eventually go out and they'll get into some altercations as the males and the young males will decide which pack they're gonna try and squeeze into and so on. Does that answer your question?
It was the pack leaders. I got the impression the packs were bigger than like.
They can be in some
immediate
places.
Yeah.
It depends a lot on like space and how much food there is, and also the further north you go, the more likely they are to have a larger pack, oftentimes.
I can't remember the woman's name who gave a lecture, but it was fascinating. And she said, the efforts to exterminate coyotes by shooting them actually results in there being more coyotes, because if you exterminate the alpha and the alpha male and female, the pack disperses and they all start creating their own packs.
Yes, and they have a phenomenal method of reproduction where when they're under stress, they'll reproduce more. And so attempts to get rid of coyotes in that way generally result in more coyotes. And it doesn't work very well in that regard.
I have a comment.
I love it. Comments are good too.
I do a lot of paddling, and the beavers are always checking me out. And I did a little research on their slapping, and it was really interesting. It said that the older beavers pretty much disregard the slaps of the younger beavers.
I've seen that, yes. I noticed that over the summer a lot. The baby beavers would come out and play together, and as they came out, the first thing they would do was like look at me for a while, and they'd do a test slap, and by that point the parents had already come out and they'd already done their checking up, and it got to the point where the adult beavers would come out and they would like do 2 laps around the pond next to me, and then they would leave and they were just like done. And then the baby beavers would come out and they'd start playing, but they usually didn't notice me right away. And so then when they did notice me, then they were slapping, and you could tell kind of like when the adults were worried about it, because you could hear them slap from further in the pond if there was something that they were concerned about. But they didn't care like what the little beavers were saying. They had very little concerns about that. And the babies would respond. You could hear the adult beavers slap further out from the river, and if it was the adult doing it, then the babies would immediately go away. They would go hide. Yeah. Yeah.
So when the yearling beavers get older, sometimes they're chased away.
Yeah, by the time they get to about 2 years old.
And what happens on a river when they're not actually in one contained space? Can they just go upriver, downriver?
Yeah, I mean, these guys will do the same thing. So these yearlings will probably disperse this upcoming fall, I believe. I have to recheck my timeline here. But it's usually they'll stay for 1 winter with their family, and then they'll disperse either this upcoming summer or fall. And they'll just go up or down river. And one thing that I've noticed is that these beavers aren't especially territorial here. There's some places where beavers will do a lot of scent marking, and they make these mounds called castoriums, and they do a lot of scent marking. And I've noticed more of that in places that are closer to rivers. And I think that's just because there's more beavers traveling the rivers, dispersing. And so the resident beavers there leave a lot of scent mounds, and they are doing their best to say, like, hey, we're here. And those bank lodges that are under the water are often like their home base. So the river itself does feel like really open and just wide, and you might move up and down. But for them, there's a whole underwater secret base there that they have access to that we like wouldn't even know is there unless we're looking. And those other beavers, when they disperse, they find that out pretty quickly. Yeah.
If we wanted to come and watch the beavers, what, I guess, time of day for this upcoming like springtime would be the best?
30 minutes before sunset, and then until it gets dark, pretty much. You could stay after it gets dark, but it gets less fun and a little bit spooky. They're very sneaky, and they're very quiet. So I've been out there after dark when I can't see them anymore, and like I thought I would be able to hear them moving around, but one literally came out of the water behind me, and I only heard it when it hauled itself up onto the shore. And like there was just a sudden like wet slap right behind me, and then I could hear breathing. And it was very spooky. And then it went back in the water, and there was like a whole kerfuffle of water and stuff, but it was, I mean, do it at your own risk of alarm, I guess.
It's like under the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
I guess how close to the...
You could just sit on the bridge and you'll see them. They come out pretty reliably. Last summer, the babies I think they were like getting used to swimming in the river, because they would just come out and like swim circles in the river for a while, and then they would go back in. And you can see them from the bridge. And that's generally the same time frame for anywhere that beavers live. It's like 30 minutes before sunset, or early in the morning, like right around dawn. You'll want to be there. Yeah.
When do you expect to see the babies?
The babies, they'll come out in the late spring, early summer. So I saw the babies last year in late April. They were already coming out. Yeah. They should be being born like right now, pretty much. I'm just kind of like waiting to see if one of the adults stops coming out for a little while or not. I don't know.
How big was the smallest beaver you've ever seen?
That big. It was like, for context, they were like this big. The adult beaver is like this size. They're really big.
Wow.
Yeah.
Last summer, I saw a beaver and it ate a whole like tree branch like that big, and I was wondering how often do they eat that much?
A lot, like all the time. That long branch that they had stuck that they were chewing, it took them about 20 minutes to chew that in half. And they can take down one like sapling branch in under 3 minutes. So among the 2,000 beaver videos I watched, you could see in 3-minute intervals that they come back and forth with branches, back and forth, and then 15 to 20 minutes, and then they'd come out with like the sapling that they had done. And then sometimes they'd be out there for like several nights working on a bigger tree. Like when it gets to like a wider radius, they'd spend some more time working on it. And they eat just nonstop.
So most of the trees on our side of the river we have caged, so this doesn't happen. And we let them eat all the food on the river park side. I'm just curious if you've ever attracted beaver up to one of the caged trees, and the beaver's like, oh, no, I can't eat that one. Like, anyway, I'm curious about how this intersects with our restoration efforts here to keep things growing rather than getting cut down.
I haven't noticed them do that, but I also haven't noticed them trying to fell a lot of big trees. Like around here specifically, I've mostly seen them go after the willow saplings, especially the ones upriver, and like the smaller diameter stuff. Like I haven't seen them actually go after a really big tree, except for the willow tree that's overhanging the pond. And that one they can reach just by standing there, and so they can just put their heads up and like chew on it without a whole lot of effort. So I mean, I feel like if we take down the cages, then they're gonna want them, right? But but they haven't seemed especially interested, in all honesty.
I've been at Wrightsville when the water level's been like 44 feet above normal. What do the beavers do then?
float. They just go up higher.
But their dens are all underwater, the bank holes are all
Well, so
underwater.
they have a
Yeah.
multiple. They'll have like a lot of different sites. So they have at least 3 lodges on the pond, and they have their big main one, and then they have like a sneaky hidden one that's kind of half in the bank and half covered, and then there's another one that's a separate underground one. And usually the way they devise these lodges is that they'll have the entrance, but then it slopes up. So once they've gone actually into their lodge, the entrance is below water, but the rest of it is above water. And so obviously if it rises 40 feet, that's not gonna matter. But they typically have they just like have these different types of lodges, and they'll just move back and forth pretty easily in between them. Yeah, I'm sure they were disrupted at Wrightsville though. I'm certain that they were kind of freaked out, and maybe they went somewhere else for a while and then came back. I'm not really sure, but yeah.
I actually know what they did.
Ooh, yeah, tell us.
Because I was there paddling. They were very disturbed and kind of feeding constantly throughout the day too. And we're kind of all over the place. There's actually a willow tree up near the falls. If you look up it, like 40 feet up, there's the top of it's cut out. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So they were just like didn't have a place to hide, and so they were just eating
Yeah. Until it
nonstop.
started to go down. And then once the water level went down, the drive going down towards the beach had successive like layers of beaver scat that was being exposed as the water went down in increments.
That makes a lot of sense actually.
Folks, I think we might wrap it there, but Anna Maria will stick around for a while, and we encourage you all to chat beaver stories amongst yourselves and with us. Anyways, thanks so much for being here, and can we all get a round of applause for Anna Maria?
Thank you.
That mink is so
It's really cute. Isn't that sweet?